Hello everyone, welcome to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana, and today's video is going to be a follow-up on some orchids that were featured in videos 2 and 3 weeks ago, just so that we can check in and see how they have progressed since those first videos. And for each of these orchids, I will put a link down in the description if you would like to watch the video that it was first featured in. Okay, so the first one that we're going to start with is this little baby orchid in a pot. And this orchid was featured in a video about rescuing a basil keiki. If you remember from the first video, this orchid was just at a very, very deep discount at my local nursery, and the mother plant had died, but it had produced some aerial roots that were just sitting on top of some very, very old media. And I purchased that and decided to see if I could rescue this basil keiki. And I had this orchid sitting in a bag with sphagnum moss for about 2 weeks, and then I did the repotting video. And if you remember, in that repotting video, I purposefully put one of the roots up against the edge of the pot so that I could kind of see if it was still getting green, see if it was still alive. Well, and sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. And this orchid is now 3 weeks later struggling a little bit. A few days ago, I noticed that the longest root that it had actually died. And even though the tip was still just the tiniest bit green, the part of the root that was connected to the axis of the plant was on its way out. So now this little basil keiki is dependent on some much shorter roots for hydration. So what I did is, at night, I have been putting it back in a plastic bag to make sure that it has more even moisture until all of these little roots can better adapt to the bark and hopefully branch out a little bit. When I noticed that the main root had died, I was also noticing that the leaves of the orchid were beginning to dehydrate just a little bit. So I thought putting it back in the bag might be a good idea until it's able to establish itself a little bit better. If you're curious how putting the orchid in the bag can help, it's kind of based on, I guess, plant biology. If you can remember, like all the way back to high school plant biology. On the bottom of the leaves, there are little structures called stomata. And those stomata open and close for the plant, release oxygen and take in carbon dioxide. And every time those little stomata open and close, they cause the plant to lose some moisture. So because this orchid was having difficulty retaining moisture, I put it in the bag because most of this activity, I think for Phalaenopsis, happens at night. So when those stomata are working to open and close, exchanging the gases, it will prevent the orchid from becoming even more dehydrated if it's inside a bag with a little bit of humidity. So that's why that process can work. You know, the jury is still out whether this little orchid will make it, but we're giving it a go. Okay, so the next orchid, and this was about 2 weeks ago. This was from my video about the cork bark trick and trying to direct roots down into the media instead of having them grow as aerial roots, because if the roots go into the media, they can support the plant better. So I had placed cork bark on the top of this pot. There was a little tiny root just poking out right here at that time, and I put the cork bark down to try and draw that root downward into the media. And that little experiment is working. Hopefully the camera can focus in there, but you can see that that root is headed down towards the media. And I'm even going to dislodge this piece of cork from behind that root if I can. And that little root already knows which way to go. So that root will be heading down into the media in order to be a stronger root to support the plant. On this side, there was a root that was attempting to be an aerial root, and I just covered it in some cork bark in the hopes that instead of being an aerial root, it might be a root that goes down into the media. And even the cork seems to be helping there, because instead of the root sticking up out of the pot, it's at least on the surface of the media. Okay, next orchid. This orchid was featured in a dendrobium repot that I did a couple of weeks ago. And at the time when we were cleaning up the orchid, there appeared to be two tiny little new canes forming at the base of the plant. And I just wanted to show you the progress in 2 weeks. This orchid has decided to go ahead and grow those two new canes right now. So one of them is right down there. You can see it poking out. And the second one that we discovered when we were repotting it is right here. And it's also poking out as well. So I would not necessarily expect dendrobiums to be putting on new canes this time of year. That's a little maybe unusual, being that it's fall. See if we can refocus in on that one. However, orchids will do what they're going to do when they want to do it, and my job now is to just continue treating this orchid in a way so that it can support that new growth. Okay, that's the update on 3 orchids from 2 and 3 weeks ago. I hope you enjoyed watching. Go back and watch the first videos. The entire story will make a lot more sense that way. And thanks for joining. Hit the like button, and the subscribe button will be in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen.